Just wait a few seconds. Hello, my dear friends. Best greetings from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. My name Victor Fursov, a research entomologist, beekeeper, and teacher. And today I will be reading you some stories, some chapters of books of a British entomologist. His name John Lubbock, British entomologist and psychologist. And why I decided to read it? Just because I found original book of Sir John Lubbock in Open Library, and it was first edition published in 1883 and 17th edition was published in 1929. Yes, and it's already nearly 200 years from the publication of this book, which the name of this book, Ants, Bees, and Wasps. Quite interesting. Ants, bees, and wasps, they didn't disappear still now, after 200 years. Possible they will be disappearing, and they're disappearing slowly or rapidly, we don't know. But book is still existing in an open library. I am very pleased to read it. And firstly, I decided to read a little bit from introduction, from forward of this book, some words of essay of his friends, maybe colleagues, and the name is John Myers. He published in a foreword the paper named Lubbock as entomologist and comparative psychologist. Let's go. And then I will be reading some chapters of this book, because it's interesting even after 200 years passed from this time, and it can be interesting for some people who can listen, understand, speak, read, write English. Right, and this global world is reading, writing, speaking, and listening to English. Let's go. Lubbock as entomologist and comparative psychologist. And actually, he also published some papers where he described Pristrichia aquatica, excellent subject, interesting calcid wasps, which I just indicated here on this poster behind me. So that's why I know about Lubbock for a very old time, for ages. Lubbock as entomologist and comparative psychologist. Some verses in the beginning. How doth the banking busy bee improve the shining hours by studying the bank holidays, strange insects and wild flowers? From Punch in August 1883. From the paper Life of Sir John Lubbock on page 199. Who was John Lubbock? John Lubbock, afterwards Lord Avebury, was born in London in 1834. His long life was passed in the most prosperous period of British history, when the fruit of industrial revolution has ripened but not yet has been begun to decompose. Though his circumstances were among the most comfortable in the comfortable age, his beginning work in the family bank at the early age of 15 bred in him habits of industry, which led to solid achievement in many spheres and enabled him to escape the futility of wealthy dilettante. In his scientific work, an early contact and lifelong friendship with Darwin was undoubtedly a paramount influence. This gave him above all his viewpoint as a natural selectionist, for he was in no sense a profound thinker. In estimating Lubbock's work, the critic is compelled to divide it into compartments, much as Lubbock himself divided the hours and quarter hours of his day. If we make waterlight compartment, so also did Lubbock, in whom it would seem the anthropologist influenced, but little the entomologist or politician. Thus he took no academical anthropological theories into Parliament, nor adopted there the professorial pose which is generally fatal to influence in any assembly of Englishmen. as was told by Mallet. In spite of his experience, knowledge of ants, and of man, he missed practically entirely, or at least failed to develop the immense importance of a comparative study of animal and human sociology. Were he concerned only with Lubbock's investigations of insects and on animal behavior, there can be no doubts that in his biological researches he took Charles Darwin, his master, as he called him, as a grand exemplar. Charles Darwin wrote a purely systematic monograph on an obscure group of animals, the barnacles. Lubbock did the same with those highly neglected insects, the smallest, the Calambola and Tisanura. Charles Darwin wrote on expression of the emotions in man and animals, but Lubbock on the behavior of dogs, insects, and other forms. Both of them were keenly interested in the relations between flowers and insects. From his parents, Lubbock received a religious faith which formed his moral character, and from Darwin a theory of evolution, which guided him to his scientific inquiries. Both he retained without material alteration to his death. In anatomy and taxonomy, John Lubbock's contributions were of solid worth and have not been yet superseded. His monograph of the Calambola and or Tisanura is still a chief authority on the structure and classification of a difficult but increasingly important group of insects. His work on the anatomy of ants is very detailed. His dissections and the inquisitive drawings by which they were illustrated having never been surpassed, as it was told by Donisthorpe. Sir John Lubbock was the first to find hordotonal or supposed auditory organs in legs of ants. John Lubbock pointed out his resemblance to the subgenial hordotonal organs of Orthoptera, discovered by von Siebold in 1844, but although he fancied he could discern some of the minute structure, his account and figure is very primitive, as it was told by scientist Wheeler in 1910. One of his most interesting contributions to insect anatomy was his discovery of so-called internal gland of scale insects, or Coccidae, family Coccidae, a complex arrangement of a digestive tract occurring in analogous not homologous form in a number of other Homoptera insects, and enabling these insects to deal with the superplus, water, and or sugars of a plant sap, which they imbibe. In insect biology, two problems to which Lubbock devoted in a small book of perennial interest. These are firstly the origin of insectarian metamorphosis, and secondly the origin of insects themselves. In seeking to explain the structure of many insect larvae as adaptations to their own special environment and mode of life, Lubbock was undoubtedly sound. As to the origin of insects, he's not a whit more than Lubbock's book appeared in 1874. There is a fairly general agreement that modern insects are descended from Campodea-like forms, as Lubbock suggested, but beyond that, is a mist of theory and controversy. We come now to Lubbock researchers in animal behavior. Since the present volume contains fairly copious annotations of his experiments with ants, bees, and wasps, we deal here only with general conclusions. For example, Donistorp admirably summed up the work of ants like here. John Lubbock was the first observer to attain precision in experiment, marking individual insects, to confine ants between glass plates containing earth, to observe ants' nests for long period, to keep individual ants alive for many years, to witness the foundation of a colony from eggs, to produce females in captivity, to prove that eggs of aphides, sucking insects, were carried by ants into their nests from the winter and then hatched in the spring, taken out and placed to the proper food plants. That ants were sensitive to ultraviolet rays, and so on are the facts. And in the same volume, John Arthur Thompson wrote, "We have seen that Lord Avebury, John Lubbock, had what might be called a characteristically dynamic view of nature. He did the share of anatomy and histology, species marking and classification, but what he cared for most was the creature alive." It is Thompson's conviction that the greatest for many services that Lord Avebury or John Lubbock rendered to zoology was the being a pioneer of an experimental study of animal behavior. In this, however, a much greater than he, Henry Faber, entomologist, was many years before him, while a century earlier, still a Reaumur researcher outlook was essentially experimental. It seems to us that scientist Thompson was near the mark of stressing John Lubbock's interest in insects as a living creature. It was Lubbock's supreme contribution, the basis of his psychological achievement, that he got to know individual insects intimately. It was a triumph of technique. When an ant died, which he had kept for many years, the French paper, which had a paragraph profoundly sympathizing with a great scientist on the loss of his aged and valued relative. This paper showed, unconsciously perhaps, a much insight, a humor. This attitude, his treatment of experimental animals as a personalities, just justified in his results. As we venture, the prophecy will be increasingly justified in the progress of animal psychology. It saved Lubbock from Scylla of regarding insects as a mere reflex machine, while his own meticulous observations steered him reasonably clear of a Charybdis of anthropomorphism. It is probable that animal psychology of the future will find less a criticize in Lubbock conceptions of insect behavior than in that of many of his successors who deal in such dubious notions as reversed behavior and forced movements. Even his anti-Bersonian heresy. Wait a minute. I need to find. Here you see that the mental powers of ants differ from those of man, not so much in kind of a degree. Probably hardly deserves the criticism given by John Arthur Thompson, who wrote, "Now Lord Avebury, John Lubbock, was very well aware of these limitations of instinct, but he did not draw the conclusion which seems clearly to many naturalists of today, that instinctive behavior and intelligent behavior are quite different evolution texts. There is no reason to believe that instinctive behavior is a sort of low-grade form of intelligent behavior, and there is a little reason to believe that instinct is due to lapsed intelligence. Perhaps not, but there are good grounds of thinking with McDowell, which said, instinct and intelligence represent neither two divergent lines of evolution, not two stages of evolution, but rather are always only two aspects of all mental life, which we distinguish by the effort of attraction, an effort which Lubbock, studying his insects as individuals and their activities as a whole, didn't find it necessary to make. One of the most remarkable features of John Lubbock's works is their extraordinary popularity. He was no means a poet of science. He had none of Henry Faber fire nor beauty, yet his biographer was able to write, "For the type of all popular ignorance, the man in the street, the name of Sir John Lubbock is associated, in the first instance, no doubt, with the bank holidays, but in the second, with the ants, bees, and wasps. Book, Ants, Bees, and Wasps, which about he published a very delightful and widely read volume a little later." The idea of this man of business and of legislature portion over the small and hardy insects struck the fancy of a people by its apparent paradox. It gave them one idea, the more of the extraordinary varied outlook and interest of a gifted man, who was himself a remarkably ant-like industry. At this period of his varied career, it is indeed evident that the aspect of his multitudinous industry, which has impressed itself most vividly in the popular imagination, was his study of the intelligence of a hymenopterous insects, like on this poster. Calcid was too. For the time being, in all events, it was overshadowing all that he had done antiquarian research in other branches of science, in finance and in social legislation. It is probably true that more than half of pleasure for research with him lay in communicating the results to others. As Sir Mallet says, knowledge was not an ultimate end with him. He was not primarily a student, but a man of affairs, and quite as strong in him as love of knowledge, with his desire to share it with others and make it subservient to practical objects in improving the social and economical conditions of his fellow men. So far as entomology is concerned, he implied evident, at least in his own generation, the memory of Lady Glenswil, which has like to have suffered for her devotion to entomology. He has the last of the great Victorian amateurs. With a white man's increasing exploration of the other corner of the globe, and with the realization that insects of his greatest rivals, their relations with men are now taking on a sterner aspect, and this with the immense growth of entomology itself, will probably prevent any future amateur from attaining the eminence that was Lubbock's. And actually, what is about the ingenious Lady Gainesville, whose memory had like to have suffered to her curiosity. What's few words about her? Some relations, but was disappointed by her will, attempted to set it aside by act of lunacy, for they suggested that none but those who were deprived of the senses would go to a pursuit of butterflies. Her relations and legatities supinated Dr. Sloane and Mr. Ray to support her character. The last gentleman went to Exeter and to the trials, satisfied the judge and jury of a lady laudable inquiry into the wonderful works of her creation, and established her will. She not only made the study of insects part of her amusement, but also as a curious of her garden, and raised an iris from a seed, which is known to his days by Miss Glanceville, Flaming Iris, as it was written by Moses Harris in Aurelian or Natural History of English Insects in London in 1766. This is a chapter from the book of Sir John Lubbock, Ants, Bees, Wasps. And I guess so, after reading this part, I can read a little bit more from the book as well, but not too much, maybe few pages. And can try to answer the questions. Starting from introduction. Introduction. Just check the paper. This is not hard copy, difficult to open. Difficult to open it. Maybe we can meet. Okay, anyway. Wait a minute. Okay, I changed here several pages. The book was titled Ants, Bees and Wasps, a record of observations of the habit of social Hymenoptera by Sir John Lubbock or Lord Avebury. I read about John Lubbock himself. Here, some pages with titles. Okay, I can read a little bit more from the chapter 1. Wait a minute. Ants, bees, and wasps. The anthropod apes, no doubts, approach nearly to man in bodily structure than do to any other animals. But when we consider the habits of ants, their social organization, their large communities and elaborate habitations, their roadways, their possessions of domestic animals, and even in some cases of slaves, it must be admitted that we have a fair claim to rank next to man in the scale of intelligence. They present, moreover, not only interesting but also a very intensive field of study. Ants are divided here into 3 families: the Formicidae, Poneridae, Myrmicidae, comprising many genera and large number of species. In this country, in Britain, we have rather more than 30 kinds, but ants become more numerous in species, as well as individuals in warmer countries, and more than 1,000 species are known in the world. Even this large number of certainly far short of those actually in existence. I have kept in captivity about half of our British species of ants, as well as considerable number of foreign forms, and for the last few years have generally had from 30 to 40 communities after observations. After trying various plans, I found the most convenient method was to keep them in nests, consisting of 2 plates of common window glass, about 10 inches square, and in the distance apart from 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch. In fact, it's sufficiently deep to allow the ants freedom in motion, and slip of wood around the edges, the intermediate space being filled up with the fine earth. If an interval between the glass plates was too great, the ants were partly hidden in the earth, but when the distance between the plates of glass are proper, regulated with reference to the size of ants, they were open to close observations, and had no opportunity of concealing themselves. Ants, however, very much dislike light of their nests, probably because it makes them think themselves insecure, and I am always therefore kept in the nest covered over, except then under actual observations. I found it convenient to have one side of a nest formed in a loose slip of wood, and on another corner I left a small door. This glass nest I either kept in shallow boxes with loose glass covered resting of base, which admitted enough air and yet was impervious to the ants, and on stands surrounded either by water or by fur, with the hairs pointing downwards. Some of the nest I arranged in stands, as shown on the picture, and about 6 nests are lying in one platform, which could be turned to the facility of observations. So far, Sir John Lubbock created very special nests, which are quite close to the modern observation nests, which we call now formicariums, terrariums, aquariums, and formicariums for ants. And he did his first observation, just putting ants in the artificial nest in between window glasses and filled the space with the earth, and making close observation just directly for each ant freely and easily. So I will continue to read the book Ants, Bees and Wasps in my future streams. So follow my channel. And now I will answer a few words on some questions here. And thank you for watching to one camera, which I just take off. Okay. What about questions? Questions about caterpillar. Caterpillar, which is just crawling on the surface of leaf and keeping on the surface. Caterpillars using 3 pairs of legs, just here in the beginning of body, and several pairs on the rest of the body. It's touching to very, very shallow list. Because this is adaptation. This is very serious adaptations, and some scientists and some researchers are studying this adaptation, this attachments, and this even because some surfaces covered with wax and very, very sleepy, very sleepy. So that's why caterpillar of other insects can crawl, and they're touching very, very toughly. For example, this is sailing, some Diptera. Wait, I have here some my Diptera. I might have here. Wait a minute. I might have. Yes, if we can imagine this is ant, but this is a Diptera. So if some flies, I have flies, but wait a minute. No. If this is a fly is flying and just attached to it upward like this, with head down, and attached with the legs. It was interesting, it was found in the research that the legs of insects were producing some substances, some liquids, and when they're just attached, okay, this is for some insects, they're attached to the surface, they produce and they freeze, they glued to the surface, very shining surface of something, of leaves, for example, of plants. They glued with ants and flies, mosquitoes, were glued to the surface. And then in the just parts of second, just in a part, they just re-glued. They attached again and they fly. They just glue it and they deglue it. This is very strange. It sounds very strange. How such animal as an insect, as a fly, can be running on the surface and then attached just by glue. Yes, but this is synthetic glue. Proteins. This is a special proteins, special ferments which allow insects to be glued to a surface and then can be re-glued and fly away. And it was found that on the surface will be some small points, small tiny points of proteins and ferments, which shows that insects were glued to the surface for a long time, even like this, very toughly. What about appearance? The question number 2 about bees and social insects. What the origin of bees and social insects? This is a great question. I guess so. In a couple sentences, it's quite difficult to describe appearance of social behavior in insects, because Hymenoptera, you see here, this is a parasitic Hymenoptera behind of me. Calcid was superfamily Calcididae, order Hymenoptera. And Hymenoptera and some other insects, they have a kind of a social behavior. Bees, wasps, bumblebees, termites, we are not Hymenoptera definitely. They have a social behavior. And how it was developing. There are some a lot of books written about it, about development of a social behavior of a solitary, in the beginning for solitary bees which are making solitary nests underground or inside hollow trees, in wood, solitary trees, and then just these bees just made kind of a social behavior and the same as ants. This is a miracle. And this is evolution. But for that, and you need to read, for instance, the book, if you want to know more about evolution of Hymenoptera. You need to read this Russian book, Hymenoptera and Origin and Evolution. Yes, yes, I keep it on my table. It's written also, it has been translated. Has been translated in English, definitely. And it was written by Sergei Malyshev, famous hymenopterist. And here you see here, Hymenoptera wasp. This is Ichneumonidae wasp. Ichneumonidae wasp, which is paralyzing the host. So if you want to know about your question about appearance of bees, wasps, and social Hymenoptera, try to read this book. But this is difficult because here evolution from a simple behavior to the more complex behavior to very special behavior. Behavior is very different. So this book filled with all different examples of social behavior and instincts behavior of insects, of Hymenoptera insects, because there are some transitions between one type of insects, one type of behavior to another type of behavior to next type of behavior, some interrelations between them. So quite complex relations between different groups. So it's quite difficult to read this book. If you are just 17, okay, easy to remember, but quite difficult to catch everything. Of course, this is like collection of Sphencidae, of some grasshoppers, behavior for some parasitic and predaceous wasps as well. Because the number of species in Hymenoptera over 100,000 species, and each of species has special peculiarities and adaptations in behavior, and there are special transitions between one type of behavior to another type of behavior, next. So this is a complex of behavior. But if you want to have some reviews from this book about evolution of bees and social insects, that's a really good idea. I will catch some summaries, some good examples of social behavior, and we will talk about it on my channel in future webinars or streams. Webinars for meeting for several people online, and actually it will be recorded as well. It will be put on my website, on my YouTube. Sorry that we need to go to the end to finish this stream. No, sorry, but I'm speaking English with my audience. You know what is the reason? Because now English is a global language worldwide. So learn English, read English, write English, listen to English, understand English better. And looking forward to see you soon in my next streaming lectures. And don't forget to go to my Patreon page. The link will be under this video to support my channel. Hello, Keeper. What country are you coming from? Keeper of ants, bees, or wasps, or honeybees? Write in your comments. No answer. So thank you for coming. Looking forward to see you soon on my channel again. Coming back. Write your comments, ask your questions, visit my Patreon page. Looking forward to see you as a subscriber on my channel. Sorry that you came just too late. I'm going to finish this stream. 39 minutes of stream is good enough. Keeper, what country did you come from? What is your own country? What is your native language? Where you are? Write in comments just for fun. Because I'm located in Ukraine and I'm studying parasitic wasps. For people who first came to here, I'm studying parasitic wasps of the family Trichogrammatidea, which are used in a biological control. Family Trichogramma is a famous Trichogramma egg parasitoid of different Lepidopterus. Oh, Keeper from Ukraine, good one. Okay, thank you for coming. You understand what I'm speaking English? If you are in Ukraine, you do understand, because in Ukraine now we are speaking Ukrainian and speaking English. And I wish you know better English, better for communication, for your research, for your improvements. Not speaking very much. Don't worry. Be happy. Now I'm happy because there is a light, there is a quiet day outside in this terrible time of a war between Ukraine and our strange neighbor. Glory to Ukraine and glory for our victory. Good luck and see you soon on my channel. Thank you very much for coming. Write comments, ask your questions, and visit my Patreon page. Good luck and see you soon on my channel. Bye-bye. See you soon. I guess keeper is keeper of ants. Like this. All right? Visit my other lectures and other news on my channel. To be continued, as English people say. And love native language, English, Ukrainian, and Ukrainian as well. Bye-bye. Good luck.